John chapter 9. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So where is Jesus coming from? He's passing by as he's going out of the temple. And remember, last time we kind of hinted at this has some deep theological implications as he's leaving the temple grounds, as God is once again exiting. But then he's passing by a blind man. And why is a blind man sitting there? Well, because this is outside the temple where, religious people are going. And so you can expect to have some, generous people give you some money. So he's been sitting there begging. Okay. And one of the questions that comes up is like, hey, whose fault is this? Is it his somehow? Like he's born this way. So like, was he a really bad kid in the womb even? Like, was he like prenatally sinful? Like, what is this? Or was it his parents? And this is actually based off of, some debate at the time, because you do have some passages about like, hey, the sins of the father will be visited upon their children, or, you have other things of like, hey, for each person's own sins, they will be condemned. So like, and you can look up those verses, but like, there's this kind of discussion, religious discussion about like when bad things happen, whose fault is it? And that's actually something that we kind of fall into very easily on our end too, where it's like, well, whose fault is this? Who caused it? Who caused this problem, right? Jesus answered, "This man didn't sin, nor did his parents, but that the works of God might be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world." Okay, so Jesus is like, it's neither of neither of those things are why. Okay, but instead, it's so that the glory of God is going to be shown. And I don't know, that doesn't sound very satisfactory to me, right? If I'm a blind guy who's been blind his entire life, and I'm sitting there, and then I suddenly hear, oh, this is so that you can, God's gonna show off. Like, thanks, God, right? Like it just feels weird, right? Like that feels not great. Okay. But he also talks about working while it's daytime and night's coming, and you're not going to do any work because he's the light of the world. So prior to this, you had this whole section where he's saying, I am the light of the world. And the religious leaders are like, okay, what authority, who proves this? Your testimony is not valid. And Jesus is like, actually, it's totally valid. And now he's like, and by the way, I'm going to prove this darkness versus light thing. I'm going to prove it through this miracle that I'm about to do. Okay. And I don't know if we can quite solve the problem. I can't solve the problem of like, why does God choose to do certain things like this? Like, this is crazy, right? But also, I believe God is redemptive. And so he can take things that the enemy means for bad, like someone that is born blind, and he can turn it around for good. Okay. When he had said this, he spat on the ground, made mud with saliva, anointed the blind man's eyes with the mud, and said to him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went away, washed, and came back seeing. So first Jesus makes mud with spit. And while there are some ideas that like, spit is like, has some healing properties, some magical healing something or others related to it. In fact, this isn't that far off from us today, because like if you get a boo-boo, or a baby gets a boo-boo or a kid gets a boo-boo, then the mom gives it a kiss and suddenly that magically makes it all better, right? And it's probably more the love than like, the spit on her lips. But like there's still this idea, right? Of like you get a kiss because it feels better, makes you feel okay, all that kind of stuff. That's not what Jesus is doing, but we have something that's equally odd, but it like also works, placebo effects and all that. Okay. And so here he's making spit, mud. But spit is also very gross. And in fact, I've heard that aside from like actually getting like punched in the face, like getting spit in the face was like one of the most offensive things that could happen to you. Okay. So Jesus doesn't directly spit in this guy's face, but he like uses spit to put on his face. Okay. So like that's gross. But the astute of you might have also noticed that there's some connections back to like, creation, where God forms man out of the dust of the ground, right? And here, Jesus is taking dust of the ground and using it to not form a whole man, but instead to restore a man to his fullness. So that's something. Okay. And then he sends him to the pool of Siloam, which means sent, and that's a bracket there. And the word might not actually mean sent. Like it does seem to mean sending or be related to that or have its roots there, but it might not actually mean sent. Instead, it might just be a play on words, and that's totally legitimate for ancient Near Eastern or first century, Second Temple Jewish texts and other things in surrounding historical stuff. Like we're playing with words. and that's totally a-okay. So even if it doesn't literally mean sent, which it might somehow relate to in its etymology and all that, we're still okay because we're playing with words right now. And by the way, this pool, what is it? This is the pool that they drew water from during that whole ceremony bit with the water we talked about before. That's all coming out of this Feast of Tabernacles, which Jesus is just leaving the temple and all that. This is all related. It's all connected, and Jesus is tying it back in here. Okay, but now he's back seeing. Okay, he can see. This is amazing. Therefore, the neighbors and those who saw that he was blind before said, "Isn't this he who sat and begged?" Others were saying, "It is he." Still others were saying, "He looks like him." But he said, "I am he." It's like, there's this group, and they're like, "Wait, so you're the guy who was born blind? Like, how can you be seeing?" And some people are like, "Well, something magical happened. Some miracle. Something happened. Clearly this guy's seeing again." And other people are like, "Nah, that doesn't happen. Literally does not happen. Never happened before in history. This guy, it's got to be his doppelganger, his twin brother, his long-lost nephew. Somebody is not him." And he's like, "No, it's really me." They therefore were asking him, "How were your eyes opened?" And he answered, "A man called Jesus made mud, anointed my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.' So I went away and washed, and I received sight." Then they asked him, "Where's he?" And he's like, "I don't know." He left Jesus. He went to go do the thing he was told to do. I don't know where Jesus is. So they brought him who had been blind to the Pharisees. And just keep this, the man who had been blind to the Pharisees. We're already setting up a little thematic thing right here, okay? It was a Sabbath when Jesus made mud and opened his eyes. Again, therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, I washed and I see." Some, therefore, of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath." Others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" So there was division among them. Okay, so they bring him before the Pharisees because it's Sabbath. And Jesus seems to have a habit of going to Jerusalem and healing somebody on the Sabbath purposely to make a statement. Like, he's just doing this. He just seems, this is the second time, okay? And so how are we breaking the Sabbath though? Like, what's really going on here? Okay, well, first, you can't do work on the Sabbath, which of course begs the question, what's work? Well, baking a loaf of bread is clearly work. I don't know if you ever tried baking a loaf of bread, but like, it's work. Like, you have to get the ingredients, you have to mix them together, you have to take those, and you have to knead them. Oh, and kneading is also like what you'd have to do if you like took spit and like mixed it with dirt to make mud. Like, you'd be kneading that. So that's a lot like it. So that's the same action. So clearly we're breaking the law. If you're making clay, that is a sin because that's work. Okay, so you can't do that on Sabbath. That is wrong. Okay. But other people are like, hang on a second though. Like, if he's healing people though, right? Like if he's healing someone who's born blind, like how can this guy actually be bad, right? Like I don't understand. Okay. Therefore, they asked the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him? Because he opened your eyes." And he said, "He is a prophet." Okay, this needs to bring us back to several different passages, and I'm sorry, I should have jumped back to this earlier. Okay, so in 2 Kings, we have this story where we have an Assyrian general who has leprosy, a skin disease, and he has a Hebrew slave girl, probably caught in a raid or something, right? Like she's like, "Well, like you could go back to Israel and there's like a prophet there who could heal you." Okay. And there's some hilarious stuff where like then the king of Assyria sends Naaman with this letter that goes to the king, and he's like, "Hey, heal my man of leprosy." And the king's like, "What? You're trying to start an international incident? I can't heal anybody." And then Elisha comes in, and eventually Naaman gets there, okay? And then Naaman comes with all of his stuff, and he stood at the door of the house of Elisha, and Elisha sent a messenger to him saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall come again to you, and you shall be clean." And Naaman's like, "What?" He doesn't even come out. He doesn't even like wave his hand and do magical stuff. Like, what kind of sham is this? So he doesn't go and wash. But then eventually his people convince him, and he goes and he washes and he gets healed. So Jesus saying go and wash is actually well within this tradition of things. Okay. But then we also have this blind, his eyes are opened. Okay. Which also takes us to Isaiah 35. "Strengthen the weak hands and make the feeble knees firm. Tell those who have been fearful, who have a fearful heart, be strong. Don't be afraid. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, God's retribution. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. Then the lame man will leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute will sing. For waters will break out in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool, and on and on. This connects to what we've been reading. Jesus saying, if you're thirsty, come to me. Who can stand when Jesus comes and does this stuff? This vengeance. But the eyes of the blind are opened. And we already have other miracles and stuff like that, okay? And so they say, well, who is this guy? He says, well, he is a prophet. And this English, it says he is a prophet. And I think when I looked up the language, it's just that he is prophet, which actually should draw us back to like what we've already talked about before. And I should have pulled this up for you because it's sometimes hard to remember these things. But in Deuteronomy, right, we've got this section about Moses saying, hey, there's going to come one like me, a prophet that you need to listen to. He's going to come. Okay, so this guy recognizes, I think this guy is that guy. I think this guy is the Moses dude. Like the dude who's going to be like Moses. I think that's who this is. And why I think that this is important and not just randomly a prophet becomes clearer later. Okay, the Jews therefore didn't believe concerning him that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called his parents to of him who had received his sight, and they asked him, "Is this your son whom you say was born blind? Then how does he now see?" Like we don't believe you. Like, he's a prophet. Well, we don't believe that you actually couldn't see. So let's get your parents in here. His parents answered them, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but how he now sees, we don't know. Or who opened his eyes, we don't know. He is of age. Ask him. He can speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if any man would confess him as Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So this is explaining why they say this. Because these Pharisees, these religious leaders, who have a very scrupulous rule of ensuring that you don't mess with witnesses, like they have very specific rules about how you can interact with witnesses to ensure you get the truest stuff. These ones, however, are not acting like good Pharisees. Instead, they have said, yep, if anybody says that Jesus is the Messiah, he's the anointed one, you're out of the synagogue. Excommunication. Okay? This was a very powerful tool used by the Catholic Church for a while. Okay? Excommunication. You're out. You're out of being able to receive the means of grace. You're out of community. You're out. And they're using that here to tamper with witnesses. So much so that this guy's parents, who have seen that he's, been healed, are like, well, we know that happened. Talk to him. He's an adult. We're not sticking our necks out on this one. So they called the man who was blind a second time, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." Talk about poisoning the well, right? Like we are way outside the bounds of appropriate cross-examination right now for the Pharisees. They are not acting appropriately. And notice this give glory to God thing. Joshua 7. The whole story here is they've just come across the Jordan. They have taken Jericho. The walls fell flat after marching around it a whole bunch of times and blowing their trumpets and shouting. And so they're like, wow, we're winning. Like, we're doing great. And then they go to this little town, Ai, and they get their butts handed to them. And they're like, why? Like, what happened here? Like, what is going on? Like, why is this happening? And so it turns out that there's this guy, Achan, and he was, they were supposed to completely destroy Jericho, right? Total destruction. And he saw some stuff, and he's like, what? This is nice. Why are we destroying this? So he like takes it and he buries it, okay? He goes and hides it under his tent. Okay, so now rejoin the story. So Joshua rose up early in the morning, and he brought Israel near by their tribes, and the tribe of Judah was selected. And he brought for the family of Judah, and he selected the family of the Zerahites. They're using like, well, I can't remember words. They're using, like drawing straws or, the rolling dice or what, this kind of thing. Okay. Well, I can't remember the words. Sorry. Okay. He brought near the family of the Zerahites, man by man, and Zabdi was selected. He brought near his household, man by man, and Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was selected. And Joshua said to Achan, "My son, please give glory to Yahweh, the God of Israel, and make confession to him. Tell me what you have done. Don't hide it from me. And he answers, he says, hey, I really messed up. This is what I did. So Joshua sent messengers. They go to the tent. They find it there. So then Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the wedge of gold, his sons, his daughters, his cattle, his donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and all that they had, and they brought them to the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, why have you troubled with us? To Yahweh will trouble you today. And Israel stoned him with stones and burned them with fire and stoned them with stones. They raised over him a great heap of stones that remains there to this day. Hey, give glory to God. We know that this guy's a bad one. The tampering continues. Now they've upped the ante, because if you are a good Jewish boy who knows anything about your scriptures, this phrase is an intimidation tactic. So what does he say? He therefore answered, I don't know if he's a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. He's like, I don't care what you're saying. All I know is what happened to me. And they said to him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered them, I told you already, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You don't want to become his disciples, do you? Which, I don't know, the chutzpah, right? Like, these religious guys like threaten him with like, hey, you know how we could like stone you to death? And he's like, oh, you want to be his disciple then? They insulted him and said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he comes from. Two things. One, remember last time we talked about how if you can accuse the other person of doing the thing that they accuse you of, then you like win points. They're trying to win points here by saying, you think that we want to become his... No, you're his disciple. Okay, they play that. Secondly, this fits in perfectly with 8:14, where Jesus is like, yeah, you have no idea where I come from. You really don't get it. And they're like, yeah, we have no idea where this guy comes from. It's good times. Okay. The man answered them, how amazing. This guy's funny. Okay, how amazing. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he listens to him. Since the world began, it has never been heard of that anyone opened the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And there are tons of passages on this. We'll just go to Psalm 34. Okay. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Yahweh's eyes are toward the righteous. His ears listen to their cry. Yahweh's face is against those who do evil, to cut off their memory from the earth. The righteous cry, and Yahweh hears. He delivers them, right? He's near the broken heart. Okay, all this kind of stuff. So this man's argument is this. We know from the Bible, right? If you go back and look at the scriptures, God listens to righteous people, not unrighteous people. So if this man's healing people, a miracle that we've never seen before, okay, then like, what's going on? They answered him, you were altogether born in sins, and do you teach us? And they threw him out. Now, thankfully, John has already told us that Jesus already said that it's not this guy's sin that caused the problem. But they're accusing him of that. They're saying, oh, it's got to be you or your parents. So either they're really bad sinners, or you're a really bad sinner, or both of y'all. I don't know. But like, you're sinners, you're out. And they kick out this guy. Excommunication. Removed from society. Removed from the religious community. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. And finding him, he said, do you believe in the Son of God? He answered, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have both seen him, and it is he who speaks to you. Hey, you seeing right now? That's me. Okay. And he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. And Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment, that those who don't see may see, and that those who see may become blind. So we've got this seeing blind thing going on. Okay, so we've got a blind man who can now see. We've got religious leaders who not seeing so much. Okay. And there's also a footnote possibly in your Bible that like some of these verses weren't there originally. They were added in. So like worshiping him and all that kind of stuff. So like, that's all interesting. We can look into that more later, but okay. So I'm here to bring judgment. Okay? So that I came for judgment, that those who don't see will see, and those who see will become blind. And those of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things, and they said to him, are we also blind? Like, are you insulting us? And Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see. Therefore your sin remains. Jesus, Jesus pushes hard. He is after that. And he insinuates, right? He insinuates, hey, you guys, you know who the real blind people are here? Not the guy that got healed who was blind. Not that sinner guy, right? Oh yeah, he's not a sinner guy, right? But the people who claim to be able to see, but don't, they're the sinners. Oh man, so good. Okay, and just for one more fun thing, if we jump over to 1 Kings, okay, 14, I'm just going to read this. So good. At that time, Abijah, son of Jeroboam, became sick. Jeroboam said to his wife, please go up and disguise yourself so that you won't be recognized as Jeroboam's wife. Go to Shiloh. Behold, Ahijah, the prophet, is there, who said that I would be king over this people. And you can go back and read that if you want to go earlier in 1 Kings. Take with you 10 loaves of bread, some cakes, and a jar of honey, and go to him. He will tell you what will become of the child. Okay, so this kid's sick. Jeroboam's wife did so, and arose and went to Shiloh and came to Ahijah's house. Ahijah's house. Now Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were set by reason of his age. He's too old to see anymore. Okay, he's blind. Yahweh said to Ahijah, behold, Jeroboam's wife is coming to inquire of you concerning her son, for he is sick. Tell her such and such, for it will be, and when she comes in, that she will pretend to be another woman. So when Ahijah heard the sound of her feet as she came to the door, he said, come in, Jeroboam's wife. Why do you pretend to be another? For I am sent to you with heavy news. Go tell Jeroboam, Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, because I exalted you from among the people and made you prince over my people Israel and tore the kingdom away from David's house and gave it to you. And yet you have not been as my servant David, who kept my commandments and who followed me with all his heart to do that only which is right in my eyes, but have done evil above all who were before you, and have gone and made yourself other gods and molten images, and provoked me to anger, and have cast these things, and la la la. Therefore, behold, I will bring evil on you. All right? And he's going through this whole thing. All right? So arise, therefore, and go to your house. When your feet enter into the city, your child will die. All Israel will mourn for him and bury him, for he only of Jeroboam will come to the grave, because in him there is found some good thing toward Yahweh, the God of Israel, the house of Jeroboam. Okay? And then there's more. Like, there's so much more. But I think it's great that we have a blind seer here in 1 Kings 14. And I don't know, that's just kind of fun with this whole thing. Like, seeing blindness. Blindness isn't even a problem if you're following God. Like, this whole thing. Okay, just cool stuff with that all the way down. Lots of good stuff. All right. See you next time.